Hello, everyone. The weather today's Munich is beautiful, and we are starting our second online panel discussion dedicated to DiGA development topics. Last time, our panel discussion was devoted mostly to pharma industry and the ways how DiGA application can boost pharma business. Today, we are targeting wider audience and would love to cover what is actually essential aspects and success factors for building the first DiGA application and to start your DiGA journey as a business. Today, we'll try to cover what actually differentiates DiGA application from software as a medical device or, for instance, digital therapy application. We'll try to understand what does it mean to be a successful DiGA application from product, technological, regulatory standpoint. And we're happy that today our partners, Google Cloud, joined us to actually elaborate how Google can support DiGA development. So stay with us and we'll start a small round of introductions. Patrick, I'm passing microphone to you to start it.
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a pleasure for me to be here again. I have 26 years in the healthcare industry, 10 of those with large or global corporate organizations in medtech. And that's where I learned all about marketing and strategy and portfolio, and software topics have always accompanied me. So for the last 7 years, I've been self-employed as a strategy consultant and ad hoc manager. And for the last 2 years, I've been very busy with DiGAs. So I have got real world experience. I'm supporting the C-levels, but also manage the teams and work very closely with the product management. So that's why I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. Oliver?
Yeah, greetings from Spain. Already on vacation, a little bit of sunburn, but still didn't want to miss, of course, this second round. My name is Oliver, working at Nextech Medical. Looking back at 25 years within the field of software, of which I think it's a half already is on the, I'll call it the dark side, which is regulatory affairs for medical device software, helping clients to get the product CE marked or towards DiGA listing if necessary.
Thank you so much. And we really appreciate that you find the time to join us today and to be a speaker. Really appreciate it. Google team.
Laura, please.
Thanks. So hi, everyone. My name is Laura. I'm working in Google's so-called digital natives team, where I'm looking after health tech accounts. There are a lot of DiGAs, so I'm really looking forward to sharing some insights with you all. And with me is Felix.
Yes, hi, everyone. I'm Felix Lecuyer. I'm a customer engineer at Google Cloud, specialist for sovereign cloud, which means I'm helping our customers to onboard on the cloud, and specifically on the new offerings that we have, which is a sovereign cloud, where we host healthcare companies and DiGAs companies, but we will talk more about it during the webinar.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, guys. Now let's introduce DataArt team. Ivan.
Yep, thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Ivan. I'm a Vice President of Healthcare Life Science Division at DataArt in the European Union, serving our clients in the area of digital health, medtech, and pharma domains. For the last 2 years, together with our partners here, I've been working on several DiGA projects successfully. Yeah, so would be excited to share some updates and findings we have got so far. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And finally, myself, I'm Olga Romanova. I'm engagement manager here at DataArt, focusing on healthcare and life sciences projects and working with Ivan's team. So I'm over portfolio development in our company, and I will be serving you today as a moderator of this panel discussion. So let's begin our DiGA journey. And I guess the first question would go to Patrick. So Patrick, there are actually different various types of health applications which are subject to regulatory approval on the market, right? I'm talking about applications as medical devices, software as medical devices, also digital therapy companions, and finally DiGAs. So what how are DiGA applications different from other digital therapy companion applications?
Yes, let me first define a little bit so that we can compare. First, what is not a software as a medical device typically is, electronic patient records. Most of that is typically not a software as a medical device, or if you're just warning about something, but if it does not trigger an immediate medical action, then it's typically or very often not a software as a medical device. Software as a medical device performs one or more medical functions that requires conformity to the MDR, to the regulations. It is not, doesn't have to be, but it's often embedded as part of a hardware, the medical device. For instance, like a monitor in a hospital or a breathing apparatus could be connected to other medical devices, exchanging data. Is typically in a hospital setting, but can also be at a doctor's setting, and can even be got. You can even get one for yourself at home. And the way this is reimbursed is very different than other digital softwares. So here it's often part of the DRG system in a hospital, or you can get a prescription for some healthcare supply depending on what you're talking about. Now, digital therapeutics are a special form. They need to be evidence-based, and they, excuse me, my voice, very similar to therapeutic interventions. They are, however, trying to prevent, manage, or treat a medical disorder or disease, but without drugs. Or, it's basically, for instance, psychotherapy or ADHS type of support functionalities typically require clinical validation. So you need to prove that your digital therapeutic does something that normally a drug would do. And that typically comes with all the regulations that you need to basically, very often or almost always, this is a software as a medical device because it's typically directly related to therapy and decision making. Then we have a special form of that's digital therapy companions. I want to talk a minute about that first, because then DiGAs will be better understood. Digital therapy companions may or may not be software as medical devices. They can just support, guide, or engage individuals on their therapeutic journey. So, they could basically augment a therapy or a treatment experience. Could be mood tracking, diary functionalities or reminders, some educational content as such. Very often, this may not even be a software as a medical device, but it's close. Now, DiGAs could be mixes of all of the above, all of what I just talked about. And they have to be for sure evidence-based. So you have to prove an effectiveness of the software as such, independent of anything else. You need to always ensure data is protected, security, usability, that needs to be MDR conform like a standard software as a medical device. So DiGAs are software as a medical device. But on top of that, they have to behave like a drug. They have to have a standalone clinical, medical, or care pathway efficacy, and they have to have a clear medical benefit. Now, there can be combinations of software as a medical device, and digital therapeutics, and they can even have companion features. So I will talk about that later, maybe in a different question.
Thank you so much. I think you covered a bit in terms of what makes DiGA unique, but how would you probably frame, right? What makes DiGA so what is important for building successful DiGA?
Yeah, I mean, the most important part, a DiGA can be reimbursed with a prescription like a drug, that's important. But you have to have an intended purpose because it's a software as a medical device. You have to have a care benefit. I'm not going into very much detail now on that. So my three most important things is always the product vision and the concept is first. So you have to have an hypothesis of why the software is effective. Does it have a medical benefit or a care benefit, and how does it do it? So you're thinking about the therapy journey. Most DiGAs, I think all of them, are prescribed at least for 3 months. Some even have a follow-on prescription. So you have to consider that therapy journey, like what happens every day, what do you do with this DiGA? And then think about this individual interaction with the DiGA on a direct user interface. So thinking about the user journey during a concrete use of the day, but you have to do that for 3 months and more, And then typically when you do, excuse me, my voice is a bit, just one. So typically what you do in developing such a product is you do some early iterations with key stakeholders. like patients, like doctors, like many others that are experts in the field before you develop anything. And then, of course, you do business case analysis. If you're thinking about all kinds of variants, like making the target segment larger, oh my God, then it doesn't fit so well with a medical benefit. Or make it only for young people. No, that's not enough. Maybe older, but then usability is totally different. So this iterative development of the product vision concept is really crucial. That's very first place. Second, technological. So you have to think about your fundament. You have to be, there has to be some kind of calculation behind the scenes, because the software has to do something, with data and with entries, and there's some architecture in the background. This is all medical data, very sensitive, so you have to have special cloud systems, and the colleagues will expand on that, I suppose. Then you need to ensure data protection, and that's not so easy. It's easily said, but it's in reality very demanding. Interoperability, data export, this is all background stuff. It sounds boring, but it's actually a huge challenge, because these things are typically provided on mobile devices, and they have to work at home with people not very knowledgeable. This has to work basically fully automated in the back end. Then your designs need to be appealing. It should be dynamic. You have to have dynamic content exchange, your content management system. You have frequently asked questions. These things change over time. You want to be efficient about this. So the technological foundation is very important. Your product needs to grow. But the third most important pillar is your regulatory and clinical strategy. And you have to think about that very early on. Are you going to be a class 1 medical device or a class 2A medical device? That makes a huge difference in terms of development timelines and quality systems. And then you need to basically design your product from the clinical endpoint backwards. You have to always imagine, after 3 months, what will I have achieved with this patient? What do I measure? And think about, what do I do with him throughout the journey? So you have to find a balance to make things, regulatory proof, clinically sound, but still fun to use. Otherwise, people will not do it, and then you will never get this endpoint. So that's my top 3.
Yeah, I see. Okay, looking at the probably examples of success and failures that we already experienced on the market, if we, just kind of like name the success factors as bullets, how would you phrase that? How would you name a few?
Yeah, I think for DiGAs, it's absolutely mission critical to have the clinical efficacy. You don't go anywhere with the BfArM without that. And they look at your data as if it was a drug. So if you imagine your software being a drug, that's the best thing you can do in developing it and shipping it and testing it and clinically validating it. So you need to prove that one group of patients have a statistically significant benefit over another group of patients that do not have the DiGA, that do the standard care, and that one group has the DiGA for 3 months, and you have to prove that it has an incremental added value that you can measure, and that is significant enough for your target group. So if you want to enlarge your target segment, your statistics typically goes down. And if you are too narrow, then your market is very small. So this is always to be balanced, and that's why I'd like to come back to the product vision. This is very important to think of in the first place. And then typically what you do is like a best compromise here. But the second most important part is that cannot be overstressed. You have to think about taking a drug is already not so easy to think about it every day, 3 times, the exact timing and water after lunch, before lunch. It's already a challenge for many people. But just imagine using a piece of software after you've done your emails and LinkedIn and all the other nice things, some Googling, and then you have to basically fill data into your software. Just imagine having to do that like twice per day for 3 months. This is a challenge. So it's all about adherence. It's making people like using the app. It's engaging them. It's keeping them. Do stuff, provide stuff, play with it, be motivated all through. Otherwise, it will be very hard to prove your value, because you will always find that there were some dropouts. People just stopped doing it. People didn't understand it, that it's something wrong. They were afraid calling the hotline and then rather not do it. So this is really something, and that you can see. I mean, we can see it. We have a backend analytics, anonymous, but we can see that these things happen. And that's how you need to learn to make things really good. So it's all about adherence to the use of the DiGA. do the therapy.
Okay. Yeah, this actually very relates to me as kind of like patient also, right, in terms of the patient experience. So literally two things, right, if I heard you correctly, clinical efficacy and basically the adherence, right? So from the product standpoint, what are actually your recommendations, right, as a very experienced guy in the sphere, right, in terms of must-have, probably nice-to-have features that one should consider for their first DiGA application?
Yeah, thank you. That's a good question. I mean, what you will find with most any DiGA, but it's sometimes well-made, sometimes not so well-made, are educational concepts. I mean, this is the beauty about having an app, a digital solution. You can have videos, interactions, making people learn about the disease, about the therapy course, about what they can do and change in their life. So it's all about educational concept. That's kind of a valuable component so that people understand why they have to do it. Then they might more likely accept it and then actually do it. Most important, however, is that clinically validated treatment component. So you can do something that you believe could work, but better is it's scientifically proven and it's actually, there's literature, there's experience, there's data, and that is what you basically digitalize into your product. That is the core function. It makes the product clinically efficacious. That is really, really important. And then very often what is helpful for long-term sustainability and people liking using the app is if they can monitor change for themselves. They have done a lot of things. What has actually improved? What is
like
changing?
Comparing myself yesterday and myself today?
Yes, it's like exactly self-monitoring, therapy progress. Have I improved already? Because I don't notice anything, but actually I have. So these things can be motivating and give you something back for all the data that you put in and all the stuff you need to do. You see something, and then I cannot stress it. You have to put some gamification into the product. Like Clash of Clans. You want to go there and do something because otherwise you lose your stars or anything else. So it's basically making people come back, and that is something that cannot be overrated or cannot be the core use. But if you intelligently build it in, then it will help towards this patient adherence. And what you cannot forget is data protection and all the consents for patients to your terms and conditions and data guidelines and all that stuff is very complex. It needs to be done and will even increase further in the future. So this is nothing you can ignore.
Great. Thank you so much.
Optional. You want to know some optional things that?
Yeah, I'm actually very interested. That you named gamification as actually a mandatory kind of like must-have feature. So that's totally new insight. But what about optional features or functionality?
Yeah, for instance, interactions with the doctor. This can be very helpful and useful in psychological diseases or maybe with children and stuff, but it's not required. The DiGA can also have a standalone function without any doctor interaction. For instance, the data that you aggregate, the monitoring that you do for yourself, you can share it with your doctor. Could be helpful, but it's more like optional. Also, diary functions, this is the stuff I mentioned before, may not add so much value, but some people may like it, Also reminder settings. They can use reminders on their smartphone, but maybe it's nicer if they have them directly within the DiGA. These are nice to have features, social interactions with peers, other people that have the same disease, stuff like that. But it's not like mission critical to win the war.
Yeah, like feel of community or something. Cool. Okay, thank you so much. I guess in terms of the product perspective, we covered kind of like essentials. And dear guests, if you still have any questions, feel free to reach out to Patrick, to us, or actually post them in the comment section on LinkedIn. We'll try to answer them at the end of our panel discussion. But now let's move to the next pillar, to the next aspect that Patrick mentioned, technological one. So it's been a while. The DiGA applications are actually a part of German healthcare, right? And I think everyone understands that they should comply with the best, with really highest and best industry standards in terms of software development, security, compliance, right? DataArt has accumulated knowledge for software development for healthcare needs for more than 16 years at this point. And we already have a portfolio of DiGA applications that we developed, and some of them are listed in BfArM directory. But apparently, it hasn't been always a very straightforward journey, has it, Ivan?
Yeah, indeed. definitely there was a pretty challenging stuff, and even having experience in developing software as a medical device, we had to still had a lot of learning curves in this direction, especially in the first journey. But yeah, I would maybe, in a comparison to just a simple software as a medical device, just to explain several things. And I would really start with the one point, which is reflect to what Patrick mentioned several times in terms of the patient adherence. But from a technological point of view, right, we usually call it user experience, and it's very well connected to the one of the trends in the industry right now, which usually called consumerization, right? It's the moving towards with the to the end users, right, making them more clear and intuitive application which they're using, and making the boring and sometimes painful treatment process more enjoyable or friendly, right? So by technologically means, right, applying right technologies, following the right guidelines from the Apple or Google when you're developing and designing the native applications, it's a very important, right? Applying the accessibility best practices and properly, not again just designing it, but in terms of the implementation, it's very important nowadays to keep this patient adherence as well. So that's from a user interface point of view, I would say, right? But there are some hidden points which is usually in the shadow and not so visible for the end users, but they are still very important in terms of the implementation of successful DiGA. And I would maybe split them on several categories. The first one is interoperability, right? So there are some strict requirements from BfArM that the DiGA application should have interfaces of export in a human readable format or machine readable format, like, for example, HL7 FHIR, international standard of data exchange, that need to be interface of using that. The another point is in this category is integration with gematik infrastructure, which is a local German government telematic infrastructure which is building in. It has to be implemented, and especially in the area of integration with electronic patient record, which all German citizens will have, right? So, but this is a mandatory stuff, right? And you cannot avoid it. Independently, is it work in reality or not? You have to implement this thing. So another category relates to obviously integration with insurance companies, right? Because you need to be reimbursable, you need to register your patient properly with a code which you get from insurance companies, and here, rather than integrating with each and every insurance company separately, I would really recommend to find a good provider who has an interface or proxy interface connecting with several, if not to all, insurance companies as a one place. So it will be, in terms of on the first step, it might be a bit more expensive, but at the end, right, you will save a lot of nervous time and money in terms of the implementation in this regard. And the last category, but not least, which is, I would accumulate it as a data, right? So beyond just obvious requirements from BfArM in the area of anonymization of the data, which recently have been published, which are even more stronger than GDPR, and I would really recommend to read them carefully, but they're pretty clear and obvious. I don't think that we need to pay a lot of attention. But what is not so obvious right now is cloud hosting. I would say that's the one of the cornerstones right now in this industry, in this area related to DiGA. And we all understand that cloud providers gives us a lot of powerful tools, right, in terms of the data processing, data storing, a lot of services beyond that. It's very attractive to use clouds nowadays, right? And they're becoming more and more attractive. And it's obvious that sometimes to just leverage it, on the long run, it can save you a lot of time and effort. But I would really recommend to be very accurate in this, right? Because until recently, right, there was a strictly prohibited to use any foreign cloud providers out of Germany, and the only German cloud providers were eligible to do that. Right now, there are some workarounds, and we will mention that a bit later. But again, my point here that when you will start choosing how, where you will store the data, process them, etc., be very, very accurate in your evaluation process, right? Because you need to not just fulfill the general data privacy and security requirements, but also specific BfArM features, which again is not so easy to interpret. That's on a common sense, I would say.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm actually smiling because you reminded me of one anecdote that we came across when we were doing one of the development of DiGA applications, and it was actually with regards to specific BfArM requirement to login access to database. And to your previous point, right, that it's important to pick the right cloud provider. It turned out that time that this specific cloud provider was not supporting this functionality. And currently, it's kind of like a funny story, but at the time, it was a bit stressful and even challenging, kind of like an obstacle in terms of software development. And basically, the paths we had is either to move forward with some custom implementation, which would affect the timeline, the deliveries, and everything. Or secondly, is to do the migration worst case to a different cloud provider. So yeah, that's kind of like a funny story now because we managed to find the workaround, but it was not that funny at that time. Yeah, so definitely. Right. And yeah, Ivan, you mentioned that not so kind of like long ago, BfArM wouldn't actually approve the DiGA application, which was hosted on American cloud. But things have changed in this year. And Oliver, I guess you're the best person among our experts to comment on this one, right?
Yeah, definitely. I remember the first discussions at advice meetings with the BfArM, where just by using a word like Google Cloud or the other one with the starting with an A, just using these kind of words, the discussion quickly ended with the BfArM. So there was no, you could try to explain how you would like to do it, but it was always a showstopper when you started to talk about using these kind of cloud services. So, but what I need to admit is that the BfArM is trying to learn, trying to listen, and they definitely did some homework internally and try to find at least some, let's say, compromise by updating the DiGA guidance, and the last one was exactly about the cloud services. And when the new requirements using these kind of cloud services is of course still challenging. I mean, you have to encrypt, of course, all the data you're using for patients, and you also need to make sure that the keys are kept within the European member states. And there are a lot of other requirements. Basically, I would say you rather have to sacrifice your life than to hand out any data towards the US government. So even if you have to do a lot of agreements also with the cloud services to make sure that nothing will be transferred, and if there are any kind of legal cases and legal enforcements coming up from the US asking for data, you have to go into law cases as much as possible. Yeah, basically a lot of things you have to do to avoid that data will be transferred. So although it's kind of a compromise, so the BfArM is trying to open up, it still sounds challenging, I would say. And I'm happy then to hear from Google what they say, how to help the poor startups, especially to get the use of Google Cloud.
Yeah, right. And we actually already have some questions. I would say spoiler questions in terms of how many applications are listed with DiGA. Guys, we'll come to that. A few minutes of your patience. So Laura, I guess my next question will be to you, to Google team. So as we know, Google has introduced the concept of sovereign cloud and adopted it across Google's ecosystem. So can you probably elaborate what does it mean in terms of the Google services?
Yes, absolutely. So it's really simple. It means you can run your DiGA application on the highly performant Google Cloud. You can use a hyperscaler that works and that helps you with all of the things that Ivan already mentioned, like scalability and high performance, etc., with fully compliant solutions, with peace of mind, so you can really focus on delivering benefits with your DiGAs. So we basically provide the tools and the solution that you need to do so. And we have also partnered with a trustworthy third party, which is T-Systems, and we're going to hear more about this system in a minute. But basically, that really allows you to host your DiGA on the Google Cloud, despite all of the challenges that Oliver already mentioned. And one of that was the key management, which is, of course, a challenging one. So this is also where the sovereign cloud comes in super handy.
Okay. And in terms of the key management, so how this actually being processed, how does this operate in the sovereign cloud concept?
Yeah, let me dig into this. So we have partnered with T-Systems, as Laura mentioned, to build a cloud solution addressing the sovereignty requirements of our customers in Germany. So it's not specifically built for DiGA, but it works very well for DiGAs, because this sovereign cloud solution addresses the BfArM requirements related to the hosting of a DiGA. And it is aligned with the latest version of the BfArM guidelines that Oliver mentioned. Indeed, for example, it makes sure that the data remains in Germany, be it at rest or in transit. And it also makes sure that the data is encrypted with the keys that it is hosted by T-Systems. And T-Systems is a German company, so it is in line with what is expected by the BfArM. So this way, it's a German company that holds the keys and which control access to the data. So as you know, if you don't have the key, you cannot decrypt the data. So if T-Systems blocks the access to the key to Google, then Google cannot decrypt the data and cannot hand over the data to an American authority, for example. So this is basically how it worked. And it's a managed solution, meaning that the setup is really easy and there is no infrastructure to be managed by the cloud user. So in a nutshell, this is a sovereign cloud. And with the sovereign cloud, we make sure that the DiGA provider remain in control of its data and that they can benefit from the scalability and the innovative services of the Google Cloud in a compliant way.
Just to capture that I understood everything correctly, in terms of the key management, that's clear. That is being done by T-Systems, right? But for software development, does it actually mean that as a software engineer, I'm still operating with standard Google services, Google Console, right? And basically, it's just the same Google services and utilization of those as I, for instance, would have done that for building non-DiGA application. Is that right?
Yeah, that's a good question, because we have seen some other providers that try to do a sovereign cloud, but with different services, or like where the services were lagging behind the public cloud. And so we took a different approach, actually. And our sovereign cloud is built on GCP, on the Google Cloud Platform, meaning that you benefit from the same services, the same consoles that the developers know. And you can use the same deployment scripts. And most importantly, as you say, you have access to the same services from Google Cloud. So basically, it's still the GCP, but with some additional oversight and controls that are managed by T-Systems, like the key management that we mentioned.
Thank you so much.
Just to expand it, so we're not doing it only in Germany. And this is important for some of our customers and some of our DiGA providers, because they might be also operating not only in Germany, but in the rest of Europe, for example. And we're not doing this only in Germany, but it's a European approach that we're taking. And we're building similar construct in France, where it's already available, and in Italy and in Spain, and maybe some other countries to come later.
Cool, really exciting. Thank you so much for that. So And some of our guests are already interested, and I'm also interested, and many of us, is actually that sovereign concept is still kind of like relatively new designation, right? So does Google have already any applications, DiGA applications listed in BfArM directory?
Yeah, so it's indeed relatively new. So we are generally available with the Sovereign Cloud in Germany since September 2022. So it's 3 quarters that it's now live. But yeah, we already have some customers onboarded and using the platform, and we have some DiGA providers that are listed on BfArM. So we will share some more in-depth information about those providers, those DiGA providers, in our Google Cloud blog post. So stay tuned and watch for blog posts about it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. We'll definitely subscribe to you. Okay. Thank you so much, Google team. And now probably let's go back to kind of like other essential aspects of DiGA development, as Patrick mentioned in the beginning of our online panel discussion. And one of those was actually clinical studies and regulatory path. On our first panel discussion, we actually explored a bit of regulatory essentials. What does it mean in terms of the DiGA? And today I also wanted probably just to dive into the clinical studies aspect. So Oliver, the question probably would go to you. Is there any differences for the clinical studies between for DiGA applications or, for instance, just kind of like medical device, not DiGA specifically?
Yeah, definitely an important topic. Maybe I would to highlight 3 topics which would be very interesting. So the first one is that, you know, the difference between the CE and the DiGA is that for CE, you could often, for class 1 especially, for 2A also, you know, try to get a CE mark without creating your own clinical data. So you could rely on equivalent devices and rely on their data to get your CE mark. So this is a common way to go for. So this is something you can do for CE, but for DiGA that will not work. So the BfArM will definitely ask for clinical data of your own or based on your own device. So it's very important. So that means in terms of your planning and your timelines, you can save time during the CE marking, where you won't need a trial, but you need to definitely plan time for clinical data before you go towards BfArM and the DiGA listing. So that's very important. So this is one of the key differences. So the other topic is, you know, I would say the sample size is also something where, you know, for the DiGA, it's easier on the other hand to get a DiGA listing, at least a preliminary listing, if you usually aim for 30 patients for the control group and 30 for the intervention group. So this is, let's say, kind of a rule of thumb where when you go into an RCT, a randomized clinical trial with this patient sample size, usually that is for an indication that is usually sufficient to get at least a preliminary listing if the results are fine. If you would go for a CE marking and you need a clinical trial, you might need more, a higher sample size, because for the BfArM it's only about the trend that you need. Of course, for the CE marking, you will definitely need to show more. That's why for the DiGA, later you have to do, let's say, the big trial as well, you know, because after the preliminary listing, you will usually go for a bigger trial and then really show what the product is capable in terms of the clinical benefit or the other potential benefits you can aim for. But for CE marking, already in the first place, if you have to go for a clinical trial, you have to do usually a bigger sample size. So that's the second one. The third one, again, is an advantage for the DiGA. For if you have a clinical trial for a DiGA, you might not look for a medical benefit, which is the key, of course, for CE marking. But for DiGA, you might also rather focus on the other possible effects like adherence or health literacy. So it doesn't have to be like really the patient itself in the focus of the benefit, but rather the environment, the framework, the healthcare framework, where you can focus on. So meaning you could do a clinical trial only focusing on adherence and not on a medical benefit directly. That's a big difference. That's not possible for CE mark. For CE mark, you need a medical benefit. But there's a caveat you have to have in mind. If you, for a DiGA, if you want to go for a clinical trial, and you only aim for, like, for example, like for adherence or for other non-medical benefits, usually the BfArM will still ask you to to use a secondary endpoint where you show some improvement on the on the medical side. You don't have to claim it as an effect, but they want to see some correlation between the improvements in patients and, of course, the actual effects you're looking for, like the adherence or health literacy or whatever you are aiming for. So yeah, this is a third topic I would like to mention, because this is always the difference between those two. CE marking has requirements, DiGA has different requirements, but in general, you can always try to combine. And if you aim for the DiGA, always look at what is the most efficient way to get an effect done. Is it really the medical benefit, or is it maybe something else? And that you should definitely check. And it's where also what Patrick mentioned, you need to check your functionality. Is it, if you have a lot of gamification inside, you might be really good in increasing adherence to the patient. So there could be something you could aim for as a primary endpoint, if it makes sense.
Thank you so much. That's actually very insightful, at least for me, as a person who's far from the clinical world. Thank you. Dear guests, please post your questions in the comment section. In a few minutes, we'll pick the most interesting one and try to answer them. But meantime, I guess we have covered the specifics of the development of the DiGA and some particularities about it. And are there any other technical aspects probably, or some additions to the DiGA development that our experts would recommend?
Let me maybe go with that, because there are actually three things that come to mind for me already. So it is scalability, it is the usability of the solution that you develop on, and of course, we cannot have a session like this without the buzzword AI. So scalability, think of it not only in terms of going international, but really also growing the number of DiGA users, and keeping that in mind, that you want all of them to always have the exact same experience with your app and don't face delays, etc. So you obviously need to be super performant when it comes to that. At the same time, though, you want to keep your run cost low. You want to make sure that you are really efficient, you're only using what you need, and also have as little overhead as possible. So two real-life examples that I can share is a DiGA that's running in multiple countries, and they were in the past using separate providers in all of these countries. And thanks to the Sovereign Cloud, now they can really combine those offerings into one umbrella and only have one team looking into all of their applications, and no more need to spread it out to different providers, and also at the same time becoming really performant. The other is a DiGA that also relies on AI technology. So what they do is they use the hyper-performant Google Cloud. You probably heard of TPUs, for example, to work with their models. And at the same time, they're only paying for it when they need it. So they do not need to put their own servers in their offices, etc. But instead, they can really really efficiently and with a dedicated team work on improving their solution. So these would be the 3 points. It's the scalability, it's the runnability, if you would say so, so the performance, and of course, AI topics that are relevant and should be considered when developing a DiGA going forward.
Thank you so much. Patrick, probably the question to you, in terms of applicability of AI in DiGAs, what's your personal opinion?
Yeah, for sure. This must be the future of DiGAs, to have really personalized therapy recommendations based on using all the knowledge about similar behavior, similar outcome. This is what we have also built up in parallel to the DiGA projects. We have built up a data analytics backend so that we have the ability to look for correlations. People are delivering so much data about their daily behavior and outcome, and how do they feel, how many pills did they take, how was their adherence level, all this information. Now, of course, you cannot use that directly, but only in anonymized and statistical ways. But this is something I can always see that in the future. And this is part of the idea why DiGAs were put up in the first place. It was supposed to advance medicine, use digitalization for better medicine. And this is where it will go. I'm very positive. So far we are struggling with the regulations and with the BfArM bar, meeting the clinical requirements. But in the future, I think there's going to be a lot of things possible that will really advance medicine and personal home treatments of chronic diseases and all kinds of things. So yes, AI for sure, and data analytics. That's my home turf, my favorite. Understanding what's going on.
Yeah. Well, I guess these topics can be actually a separate discussion. So yes, if you're interested to learn more about it, probably put some emoji or some willingness, and we can consider it for some of our next year meetings like this. But I guess at this point, it's time probably to move to some questions and answers section. And we actually already have some questions. Patrick, I think the first goes to you. You just mentioned 3 months, group 1 people using the DiGA versus group 2 not using the DiGA. And is this by law mandatory for all DiGAs? Is there any process in Germany which is strictly regulated with these regards? Yeah, so I guess the question is in terms of the DiGA control group and some placebo effect or something, right?
I can imagine this. This is the clinical design. That is the question is regarding the clinical design. Yes, I mean, most of these clinical designs are trying to prove that the DiGA has an incremental standalone effect. So you have to design a scientific experiment where you can measure that. So you have to measure against something without this component. Therefore, typically you would have cohorts where people use the DiGA and others don't. There might be other designs, maybe, but this is what I know most. I mean, most of the times we have a group using the DiGA, another one not using it. I don't know if that's the question though, and typically if you claim, if you claim a reimbursement scheme for 3 months and your therapy lasts 3 months, then that's what you need to prove. Typically.
Thank you so much. I hope we covered it. If not, guys, please feel free to come up with some follow-up questions. There is also a good one, and I think Laura actually mentioned it briefly when she was speaking. So there are news that France and Austria are adopting DiGA-like reimbursement schemas. And can you comment on this, please? And what is required for German DiGAs to enter the French market, besides, of course, language, some culture-specific amendments that may be required? Patrick, would you love to also probably elaborate on this one?
You're talking about France and Austria specifically, or well, we know that in France they have this PCAN process, so that was set up for telemedicine and is very likely fits very well with DiGA, and this is currently very new. Austria has announced it, that they would like to copy and also build up a DiGA-like reimbursement system. Belgium already has it, but very different. So here you have to prove healthcare benefits, and we expect Sweden, Netherlands to come very soon. Sweden is the most advanced digital European country, and they want to be the first and best, and so on. Yeah, so I think indeed that it's now, if you develop a DiGA now, you should think about this in the product design and the product concept already. It's not only Germany anymore.
Yeah, and any probably recommendations in terms of German DiGAs to enter, let's say, French market? So I guess localization probably, right, as an option, something else that you'd consider?
Yeah, well, first of all, language is for sure required, but it's very often a lot more than that. So there might be different requirements regarding the clinical guidelines, the ICD codes that are slightly different. But in general, if you have a clear disease and a clear therapy, that's universally applicable. So typically the change shouldn't be that big, but you have to look into every single detail and make sure that it meets the requirements of the local market. So it's not just copy pasting and translating the language here. That's not sufficient.
Yeah,
maybe
not
in
an easy
Austria.
exercise. Yeah, okay. Thank you so much for that. I actually think AI topic is one of the very promising ones, as we have some questions there. I guess this one, Oliver, should probably go to you. Can you tell us more about AI in DiGA with respect to the current MDD and MDR regulations?
Yeah, so the BfArM made it quite easy for them.
I guess we lost Oliver a bit, yeah?
That's a cliffhanger.
Okay. Okay. It happens, no worries. Let's probably switch then to to another question, and once Oliver's is not frozen anymore, we can continue, okay? So I see the question in chat with regards to UI and UX design, I guess. So how often do you design or target UI, UX and UI according to the patient user group? Example, younger patients versus older patients based on the indication, or does that not yet play a role in the development process? Ivan, Patrick, would love to take this one.
I'm happy to start, and Ivan can maybe add. Yeah, for sure, this is absolutely important. You have to think about your target group. For instance, most of the DiGAs are used preferably by female users. That's one thing that needs to be considered. Then, of course, it depends on the disease. There are diseases for children, you know, but then many of the chronic ones are rather for elderly. That needs to be considered. You can typically not do one size fits all, and you cannot be very dynamic and flexible either. So you have to make compromises. Yeah, that's definitely required. So we're doing lots of formative usability testing and early product development. That's inevitable. Ivan.
Yeah, absolutely. So indeed, majority of what we're doing is Patrick right, is for elder people, and here again the applying the accessibility points, right, regarding the bigger fonts and using the pretty clear user interface in terms of the big buttons and others, right, with a click clear educational materials and clear guidance of the software. We'll understand that usually elder people are not so active users of the mobile application, so that's always need to be considered for that, including the all kind of reminders for them, maybe even more proactively, etc. And as Patrick mentioned, it's very important to have even several usability reviews or usability testing sessions even during the design and the application before you start the implementation of it, right? So creating some clickable dummy prototypes and checking on the target audience and at least get a preliminary feedback of how it's useful, right, and how it's clear. That is very crucial in the process, sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. I don't see any other questions in the chat, at least for now, but let me actually ask Google team. And again, group, feel free to intervene here. The question is a bit visionary. So this introduction of sovereign clouds and American clouds, which are now capable of hosting DiGA, actually means a lot probably to the industry. How do you see the DiGA development, the DiGA industry, the DiGA direction will change with this news?
Yeah, so hopefully they will have a positive impact on the industry, of course, because it means you can more easily develop your DiGAs, because most likely your developers are already familiar with the Google Cloud and they are able to use it. So this is also why we came to the market with the Sovereign Cloud solution, to really enable people to offer their great medical solutions and help more people on a solution that's highly scalable and that really works for everyone. And as we've already heard, reduces cost and is fully compliant, which of course is the key point here.
I think we have spoken about the internationalization also, and it's coming in other countries. And this is where actually a global public cloud is, or like a global cloud, a global sovereign cloud actually is making most sense, because you have the scalability and you can reach then your different patients in the different countries without needing different platforms for each country. So the ability to meet local requirements, local compliance, but with a global platform is really, I think, helping those providers to expand across borders.
Thank you so much. Any other opinions, group? Okay. Oliver, I see you're back, and we still wanted to hear your opinion in terms of the question that was posted in the chat, right? So let me again probably frame it. Can you tell us more about AI in DiGAs with respect to the current MDD and MDR regulations?
Yeah, sorry, and I hope you can still hear me. I think my Spanish Wi-Fi is already in siesta mode. I'm having some problems here. Yeah, so when it comes to AI, the BfArM made it quite easy for them because they are asking that you have a medical device, that you are CE marked. So they don't care about whether it's AI or not. And if it has AI, it's already covered by the CE mark in terms of the requirements. So for BfArM, it doesn't matter, can be AI or not. You already have to have a CE mark anyway. And for the CE mark, of course, you have to make sure that you follow all the AI requirements, which are unfortunately not mentioned anywhere in the MDR. But usually it's about making sure that you planned. How did you plan to train your software? What's the statistical size that you use for training? These are the typical requirements that you aim for. How did you validate this? How did you make sure that there is no bias and so on? So typical AI questions you have to clarify, but already under the CE mark for the BfArM, they don't care about AI.
Thank you so much. Probably we have time for just very last question. May I ask the opinion of the panel as to when they think the European Union will finally settle on the Digital Service Act for the whole of Europe and any effects on DiGA? Who'd love to take this one? Patrick, maybe you'll start.
Let's hope not so soon. Yeah, if things happen similarly, and I have to excuse me today, if things happen similarly than they happened for MDR, then this is nothing that we are looking forward to. So it's likely going to come. I mean, everybody's talking and thinking about it. All the countries are following the German lead, and then the logical consequence is that there will be some European harmonization. That is quite reasonable, but I don't know when. But if the EU starts redesigning regulations and want to do it even better than BfArM, so like put something on top of it, then it will be hard.
Thank
Oliver,
you so
I'm sure
much.
you have also heard something about this.
Yeah, Olga, can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. So some of the guests of the panel discussion were asking is when do you think European Union will finally settle on the Digital Service Act for the whole of Europe and any effects it may actually, it may have on DiGA development?
Yeah, so as you may know, the making acts transferable or get them into force takes a while. So don't expect it that soon, because there are always things to discuss. So yeah, I don't have an exact timeline, but it will take some time.
Okay, thank you so much. Guys, I think it's time for us to say goodbye for today's event. I really encourage you, our dear guests, to subscribe to DataArt Healthcare and Life Sciences page, just to be updated in terms of the upcoming events like these or any other information in terms of DiGA development. And just as usual, in case you have any questions or you're considering to build your first DiGA application, feel free to reach out to our experts and basically, book a session in terms of to see how we can help you. And for now, thank you so much, everyone, for being with us. Thank you, our dear speakers, for all the knowledge that you put into this session. Enjoy the evening and see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.